Okay. Hello, everyone. We're excited to be here today celebrating Native American Heritage Month on behalf of the American Bar Association. And we are just simply thrilled to be presenting live theater today. I'm sure many of us have been missing live theater during this time of COVID. I'm Mary Smith. I am the immediate past secretary of the American Bar Association and an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation. And today we are going to be presenting a live, yes, live performance of Sliver of a Full Moon, written by Mary Kathryn Nagle, who's also one of the performers. And it is a story of resilience and celebration and perseverance of Indigenous women. It's the story of restoring the authority of tribal governments to prosecute non-Indian abusers on tribal lands. And we are simply thrilled to be doing it. It's sponsored by the section of Civil Rights and Social Justice and the Diversity and Inclusion Center. And it was a vision of President Patricia Rifo of the American Bar Association. And after the performance, don't log off, we are very delighted to have the playwright Mary Kathryn Nagle and our very, very special guest, Congresswoman Deb Haaland, to talk a little bit about the play and about violence against Indigenous women right after the panel. So we are actually planning additional programming on a variety of issues. So please visit the ABA website, americanbar.org. But before we go into the program, I'd like to introduce American Bar Association President Patricia Lee Rifo for a few introductory remarks. Trish?
Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much for that introduction. And thanks to all of you for being here today. I can't tell you how excited I am to be with all of you. This is the second of a two-part program series commemorating Native American Heritage Month. We are, as Mary said, deeply honored to have Congresswoman Deborah Ann Haaland of New Mexico's 1st District and a member of the Laguna Pueblo tribe with us today. Representative Haaland was elected as one of the first Native American women to serve in Congress. She and Kansas Representative Sharice Davids were both elected to Congress in 2018. So they tied for being the first Native women elected to Congress. And Congresswoman, my husband was born in what is now your district. So she will be joined on the panel today by our playwright, Mary Kathryn Nagle, who of course deserves special thanks for updating today's production to reflect the present day reality of Indigenous women. Ms. Nagle is an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation, and Mary Smith, whom you've already met, will be moderating the panel discussion. And I want to acknowledge in front of this entire audience the instrumental role that Mary has played in our Native American Heritage Month programming. The ABA has long been supportive of Indigenous issues, and in particular in February of this past year, passed 3 very important policies addressing issues that are of concern in the Indigenous community, including the plight of murdered and missing Indigenous women and important issues pertaining to voting rights. We are grateful to all of the collaborating and co-sponsoring groups who have made this extraordinary performance possible, as well as the other work that we have done this month in celebrating the first ever significant involvement of the American Bar Association in Native American Heritage Month. I come from the state of Arizona, which is home to 22 tribes. So it was extremely important to me personally, because of where I live, that the American Bar Association become deeply involved in recognizing the important contributions of our Indigenous peoples and in recognizing the Heritage Month. So we're very excited about today's program, and I will be quiet so that we can enjoy what I know is going to be a fabulous treat for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Rifo, and thank you so much for your vision in bringing this programming to us today. We're, just to let everyone know, we're going to be sharing a recording of this performance to everyone who is registered so you can share it with your networks. And with that, we are simply thrilled to bring you today's live performance of Sliver of a Full Moon.
Dinio galaladi, Dinio galaladi, Dinio galaladi, Juno du Ioane hesti.
I remember where I was.
I remember what I was doing.
I remember what I was thinking.
And I will never forget.
I was on the floor of the House.
At my home in Fairfax.
On my reservation.
In Cherokee.
In Alaska.
Layla,
Watching CNN.
C-SPAN.
Facebook.
watching the vote.
Working for votes.
I couldn't breathe.
I was so nervous.
All I could do is pray.
What's the vote?
30?
We got 30?
We need 218.
We need your vote.
You got my vote.
31.
Thank you.
62.
My whole life.
I dreamed of this.
85.
I prayed for this.
114.
You got my vote, Tom.
Thank you.
115.
Everything depends on this.
What if we lose?
We can't lose.
Not an option.
201.
201.
Oh my God.
I just prayed.
To Creator.
215.
Holy smoke.
216.
We got this.
217.
Is this for real?
218.
We did it.
218.
218.
They're still coming.
More votes.
235.
246.
250.
285.
286.
286.
286.
286 votes.
I couldn't believe it.
It didn't feel real.
I had to call Jax.
Harry texted me.
I just started texting.
I started crying.
I could hardly see who I was texting. I was crying so hard.
I had to scream.
I scared my neighbors.
I did a victory dance.
I prayed for my sisters.
It just seemed unreal.
It felt like a
dream.
It was
It
amazing.
was amazing.
It was a miracle.
What about Alaska?
Next time. I promise.
Why were we left out?
Everyone says.
There's no Indian country in Alaska.
Alaska's different.
Why are we different? When VAWA passed, I was watching TV and I started to cry. The rates of violence against Native women in Alaska are higher than anywhere else in the United States, and yet somehow we're always forgotten.
But we're here.
We're still here.
We've always been here.
From the time of the glaciers until now.
We were here before the United States.
We were here before the Russians.
We were here when they came.
Our men gave them fur.
And in exchange.
They gave us alcohol.
And then they took our women.
This one. Just one night. I'll bring her back, yes?
We had no choice. You had Columbus.
We had the Russians.
Tell me, how is that different?
This
This
is my story.
This is my story.
This is my story.
The story of my sister.
Of my daughter.
The story of my mother.
And her mother.
And her mother's mother.
grandmother.
My granddaughter.
This is the story.
Of my life.
Of my past.
Of my people.
This
is my story.
At first, it was hard to share it.
I had to keep it a secret.
I was too ashamed.
Too embarrassed.
Too afraid.
Scared.
Forgotten.
I was silenced.
I thought I'd be judged.
For something I never did.
But then we came together. We stopped.
Silence.
If I wasn't Native,
my story would be different.
If I didn't live on my reservation.
My story would be different.
If I wasn't a citizen of a sovereign Indian nation.
My story would be different.
I live in Alaska.
When it comes to justice,
That shouldn't make my story different.
This
is
my
story.
story.
And I'm here to share it. One sunny afternoon in May, I was returning my daughters to their father per our agreement. I dropped them off. I made sure he was home and that they were in the house before I left as usual, but he walked out to stand beside my car. I stayed in the car with the door locked, but the car window was down. And he seemed agreeable enough at first, but then he became angry because it was our wedding anniversary and I didn't wish him a happy anniversary. I quietly stated that it didn't seem appropriate under the circumstances. He lunged into the car window and he snatched my bag, took out a little address book. He flipped through it and became so angry. And then he suddenly lunged into the car again and snatched my car keys from the ignition and walked away with the keys. And he was going to throw the keys. We live in the mountains of Western North Carolina. There are trees and woods, things like that all around, pretty much everywhere. And that was the only car key I had. And I thought, if he throws that key, if I don't have a way to get out of here, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I was trying to get the key. And he turned and he finally said, okay, you can have your keys. And he threw them on the ground. When I leaned down to get the keys, he kicked me. And I rolled down a little hill. At the time, my youngest daughter was standing beside my car at the bottom of that little hill. I didn't know she was outside. I thought she was still in the house. When I rolled down the hill, I rolled into her and she fell. And he grabbed her. I was trying to comfort her. He grabbed her hands and he pulled her so hard that I was sliding across the ground, so I let go. And he went immediately to the police station and got there before I could.
Can I help you?
I need to get a protective order.
Okay. Well,
Can you do that for me?
we don't have jurisdiction over non-natives.
My wife's enrolled, and she's a danger to her children.
Fill this out and we'll process it.
It was so humiliating to be sitting at the police department. I had leaves and grass in my hair and my clothes were torn and dirty. On my side, near my rib area, within the next day, a bruise formed that was shaped almost exactly like his foot from where he had kicked me. There must be something you can do.
He's not enrolled.
He has my children.
And a protective order against you. So whatever you do, don't go near him.
He had my children, and all I had was a bruise shaped like his foot. Maybe you've never heard a Native woman tell her story of survival before. Maybe because you've seen movies like The Last of the Mohicans or Peter Pan, you think that at some point in time we cease to exist. But we are still here. Some of us live on reservations, and some of us live in suburbs. We even live in Washington, D.C.
Hello? Hi, excuse me.
Do you need something?
I'm Terry. Terry Henry.
Oh, okay.
Is this the Office on Violence Against Women?
You're looking at it.
There's no carpet.
Is that a problem?
No, I just thought.
You thought because today's your first day, we'd roll out the red carpet?
I thought there would be carpet, yes.
You work for the federal government now. You'll learn to do without. All right, here's everything you'll need. To start with, I want you to draft the RFPs that we send to tribes. VAWA provides for a significant chunk of change. VAWA, you know what that is?
Yes.
Violence Against Women Act.
I know.
We work to stop violence. We don't promote it.
I get it.
Oh, and our reports to Congress, you'll be responsible for writing those. Basically, you'll be doing all the policy work for the implementation of VAWA grants in Indian country. Any questions?
Yes, just a few.
Good. And welcome. We do so much work with Native Americans. It's nice to finally have one in the office.
My mother, she is a very beautiful Indian woman. And my stepfather, well, he's a non-native, a white man. And he was very abusive, ungodly. The earliest that I remember is being 4 years old. We were in this trailer house and my mom was screaming. I'm under the table. I'm screaming. The lights are off and the light is coming from the outside post. And the door is here. The couch is here. The TV is there and the gun rack is right there. And the table in the kitchen is right here. And I'm under the table. My mom is screaming, "No, David, no!" And I see him grab the gun and he starts beating my mother over the head with the butt of the shotgun until the only screams that could be heard were mine from under the table. And I think he beat her to what he believed was to death. He put the gun back on the rack and called her a bitch. He walked into the bedroom, slammed the door, and sat down on the squeaky bed. And then I heard the thud of his cowboy boots as he lay down, squeaking again, and he went to sleep. So I crawled over to my mom. I'm crying so hard because I think she's dead. So I put my face down to her mouth to see if I can feel her breath, and I can't feel it. So then I start crying again, and I'm only 4 years old, and I make myself stop crying again. I put my head down on her chest to see if I could feel it rising, and it was. So I grabbed the blanket from the couch and I covered her up. And I sat by her side all night. And if I'd fall asleep, I'd get mad at myself because, I had to hurry up and check to see if she was still breathing. It's not that I could have saved her. It's just that I didn't want her to die alone.
Lisa's not an actress.
She's a survivor.
I'm a survivor.
I'm a survivor.
We're all
survivors.
There were times he would be chasing us. And there was this field. And I'd grab her and say, "Come on, Mama, the moon is full." And we would crawl across this field until we got to the woods. And I took her to the hiding place where we would listen to him, to his screams that would echo, his screams about how he was going to kill us when he found us. And she lay down and go to sleep. And if I thought I heard him coming, I would wake her up and take her deeper into the woods because he'd been in Vietnam. So when I reflect back, he was afraid of the woods and he was afraid of the night. In the woods, the night, we were safe. The moon was our sanctuary, if we could make it.
I found a rat this morning. Yes, a rat underneath my desk, and it ripped open a bag of chips.
You want me to buy you a bag of chips?
Look, I really need to talk to you.
About rats?
About the grants we're giving tribes.
Oh, what about them?
I'm not sure they're making such a difference.
So give them to different tribes.
That's not the issue.
What's the issue?
Our women are raped, they go missing, they're murdered.
And our offices give tribes the money they need to deal with that.
Yes, but after the fact.
The fact of what?
We come in after the violence has occurred. By the time the women walk in the door of one of our programs, they're already a victim.
Right. You're not a victim unless something has happened to you. Listen here, Pocahontas. It is a miracle you can give tribes any funding at all. A lot of us here in DC worked hard in '94 to get the Violence Against Women Act passed. We didn't have to ask for funding for tribal DV programs, but we did. You should be thankful for what you have.
Lenora Hooch opened the shelter in Emonic 27 years ago. It's our only shelter for Native women in the entire state of Alaska. When we opened, our women had nowhere to go. We'd find them hiding in the smokehouses, in the steam house, or in boats. Our villages are so remote. Where I live in Tetlin, there are no roads. The only way to come and go is by plane, or in the warmer months, by boat. Now they tell us our tribes don't have jurisdiction, that we can't exercise any kind of authority. But when we call the state troopers for help, it takes 2 to 3 days for them to arrive, if they come at all. Why did the federal government take away our jurisdiction and give it to men who never show up? For 3 decades, This shelter has been the only place our women can go, if they can make it. We've seen a lot of women come in and out of this door, and now we have to close it. State cut our funding.
I heard.
Only shelter in the whole state of Alaska that serves Native women, and they refuse to fund us, so all we can do now is pack. What's this?
A grant from the DOJ OVW office. Enough to keep you open.
I just put 3 mothers out on the street.
Tell them to come back.
One of the women, I had to tell her to leave, and her husband had just tried to kill her.
We'll get her a protective order.
He has one. The tribe issued it last week.
Well, that's great.
Alaska refuses to enforce it.
How can they refuse to enforce a protection order?
They say we don't have jurisdiction.
What are you doing?
What's it look like I'm doing? I'm packing.
Did you ask to take time off?
No.
Our report to Congress is due at the end of the month, and I'm gonna need you to...
I'm not coming back.
What?
I'm going home to Cherokee.
I suppose the rats were just too much.
I'm done applying Band-Aids.
Our Band-Aids make a difference. They provide your people with funding.
My people don't need your funding.
Tribes do. They want to provide shelter and food and counseling.
We have to do more than give women counseling.
Oh, you're right. Please stand back and let me wave my magic wand and make all the violence go away.
We don't need your magic wand. We need jurisdiction.
My people, the Southern Ute, were one of 2 tribes in the state of Colorado. I've lived my whole life here on the reservation. Our reservation is our land, and our jurisdiction comes from the land. Creator placed us here, so we've been here since creation. And this stripping of our jurisdiction, this taking, it isn't real. But it almost cost me my life. When I was 26 years old, I started dating a non-native, a non-Indian, a white man. I was in love and life was wonderful. After the bliss of dating just 6 months, we were married. He moved into my house and lived with me on the reservation. To my shock, just days after our marriage, he assaulted me. I thought after the first time it wouldn't happen again, but it happened a second time and a third. So I called for help. And then I called for help again and again. I called so many times, but no one could ever help me.
If you're so upset, why don't you make one of your calls? You know, that's okay, baby. I'll make the call for you.
Tribal police, is this an emergency?
Well, not exactly.
Can I help you?
Well, I just wanted to apologize because, well, you see, I got a little carried away this morning and, well, I hit my wife.
Are you enrolled?
I'm white.
So you're not enrolled.
Is that a problem?
You've called before.
Yeah, well.
Nothing's changed. If you're not enrolled, we don't have jurisdiction.
He says he doesn't have jurisdiction. You want to talk to him? Well, thanks for the help, officer. When will you finally get it?
He can do whatever he wants.
They can't touch me.
I picked up the phone.
I made a call.
I kept calling.
But no one responded.
I must have called 100 times.
Please.
Can't you do something?
The answer was always the same.
We can't.
He's not enrolled.
He's not Indian.
We don't have jurisdiction.
But I kept calling.
I called the police.
Please help.
Every time.
911.
911.
911.
I need your help.
But every time I called,
no one showed up.
They would just write a report.
They always let him go.
I remember looking at those police reports in 8-point font. Years later, when I was an advocate, I pulled all of my stepfather's police records, and there were pages. All of those 911 calls were in 8-point font. Individual calls that would have at least 7 to 8, 9 pages. That's how many 911 calls were made for help. And he was never, ever once convicted for anything he ever did to her.
This isn't just about white people.
There are Indians in our community.
Our relatives.
Our brothers.
Our uncles.
We have relatives that abuse women.
And we must hold them accountable.
But if they're not enrolled,
our police can't arrest them.
There's nothing we can do.
That's my story. He's Native. If you look at him, you would think he's the stereotypical Indian, but he's not enrolled. His mother is full blood and his dad is white, and his tribe only allows the child of a father to enroll. They can't do anything to me. I'm not enrolled, he would say all the time. In order for me to feel safe, I had to sell my place and move off the reservation. I had to leave my home. As long as I remained on my reservation, federal law prohibited my tribe from protecting me.
It wasn't always this way.
There was a time before.
Before 1978.
A time when we did have jurisdiction.
Before Oliphant.
I remember when I read Oliphant.
I couldn't believe it.
My dad called.
Tribal Council convened an emergency meeting.
Said you better read this.
Supreme Court issued a decision.
It's going to change our lives.
1978. The Supreme Court said we can't prosecute non-natives.
Non-Indians.
Anyone that's not enrolled.
The court said we can't prosecute them if they come onto our lands and commit crimes.
1978.
It wasn't always this way.
For us in Alaska,
we have our own Oliphant.
And we had a time before.
Before 1998.
Before the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act.
Before ANCSA.
A time when we had land. A time when we had jurisdiction.
Before Venatai.
Before ANCSA.
I remember when I read Venatai.
I couldn't believe it.
My dad called.
Tribal Council convened an emergency meeting.
Said you better read this.
The Supreme Court issued a decision.
It's going to change our lives.
1998.
The Supreme Court said we have no Indian country.
There's no Indian country and left in Alaska.
Because of ANCSA.
But I'm still here.
1998.
1978.
My stepfather?
My husband.
He's non-native.
Not
enrolled.
He lives in my village.
After Oliphant?
After ANCSA.
After Venatai?
He began to realize.
After Oliphant?
After ANCSA.
After Venatai.
He figured it out.
After Oliphant?
After ANCSA.
After Venatai.
He knew.
It didn't matter if I had bruises.
Or cuts.
Or bleeding.
Or a broken bone.
Because of Oliphant.
Because of ANCSA.
Because of Venatai.
He could kill me and it wouldn't matter.
I am a Inupiaq. I belong to the Inupiaq tribe. The English name is Kotzebue. My family's lived here for thousands of years. I am living proof that there is Indian country in Alaska. My experience is one of cultural disconnect that I believe stripped me of the strength to protect myself and my family. It was a marriage to a Western preacher's son, the same one who later deconstructed my family. I grew up in a small, traditional Inupiaq community in a home that felt safe and nurtured love and affection. My abuse was in a home that didn't offer security, love, peace, or harmony. A place where everything that happened in that space remained there. A place that oppressed my cultural values. A place where my traditional foods were prohibited unless I was alone because they stank and looked bad. My family tried to intervene, but I was sticking to the preacher's words. You are bound by a covenant in which you cannot break. With each layer of abuse, I became less and less myself. I didn't know who I was. I simply endured the abuse, some days praying that God himself would come and take me home. My abuser would continue to use the Western law pertaining to marriage as his protective shield long after I'd left. I was labeled a drunk, uneducated native. The female judge simply accepted the words spoken by my abuser as the truth. The abuse was broad: sexual, spiritual, financial, mental, and verbal. I eventually mustered the strength to leave. I filed for divorce. When my then husband refused to reply to a court order response regarding the divorce, he had me arrested in front of our boys when he called the police and reported that I had hit and threatened him. My identity to tribe, place, and culture is strong. During my abuse, I was disconnected from all those things. I know now I did nothing wrong. I am now able to give thanks. I give thanks for finding the courage to survive. I am alive.
OCO, and thank you for having me here today to present.
Geo,
Sorry?
Band, we don't say OCO.
you're not in Oklahoma anymore?
So how long will this take?
With what I'm prepared to present, no more than 40 minutes.
No. I mean the campaign. How long will it take to get this bill passed? You know, with the tribal jurisdiction provision.
With this Congress, who knows? It could take quite a while.
Quite a while.
Months? Years?
Nothing's guaranteed.
We've been working on this for years.
Oh, I'm well aware.
We sponsored the wiping of the tears ceremony when Senator Biden prepared the draft for VAWA 2005.
I remember that.
But you think the time is now?
We need them to act now.
You need them to act now.
This has nothing to do with me.
Terry here is co-chair of the NCAI Task Force on Violence Against Women.
We're proud of her appointment.
It has no effect on my service to council.
Sure it does. You're sitting here telling us we ought to advocate for jurisdiction for everyone.
Yes.
Why should Eastern Band foot the bill for everyone else?
Because we need jurisdiction.
If I may interject.
Please.
I know it's a lot to ask, but you won't be the only ones. San Manuel stepped up, and Chief Anderson has promised the support of the Choctaw, Tulalip, Cherokee Nation.
Ogie Creek?
I believe so.
I hope so. We can't do this alone.
You won't be. Everyone is helping. We have to stop thinking about this as my tribe and their tribe. Divide and conquer has been the other side's philosophy since 1492.
Okay, but what are we really facing?
I'm not sure I know what you mean.
If we put money in this now, what's the chance we actually walk away with jurisdiction?
It's going to be difficult.
How difficult?
Challenging.
But not impossible.
We couldn't get the Dems to put it in the Law and Order Act just last year.
That wasn't a campaign.
If we can't win the Dems, we'll never reach the Republicans.
This is different.
I'm being well honest with you, Terry.
Councilwoman Henry to you, Mr. Whitehawk. And let me tell you something about our tribal council. Our tribal council doesn't do things because they're possible. We do things because it's our responsibility to do them. It is our job to protect every man, woman, every child in our community. And we know that if we protect a woman in her home, then we protect her children. And that protects her house and the house next to her and the house next to that. And so pretty soon, it's the entire community we're able to protect.
Yes, but we need to be realistic about what we can do in this.
This isn't about what we can do. This is what we should do. And what we should do is fight for this Congress to recognize the inherent sovereignty we have as a tribal government to protect our people.
Put it to a vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Mr. Whitehawk, you're authorized to lobby on behalf of the Eastern Band of Cherokees for the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, specifically to advocate for the passage of the proposed tribal jurisdiction provision. Meeting's adjourned. We'll send you the contract.
Thank you.
Very difficult.
This will be difficult.
You know what's difficult? Listening to women who have been raped, abused, and battered ask you for help and having to tell them that there's nothing you can do because you don't have jurisdiction.
I know. I was tribal police before I went to law school. I'd get a call, and before I could help her, I'd have to ask, where is she?
Is she on land that is tribal trust?
Or land that's been sold.
She could be on fee land.
And you can't just ask, where is she?
You have to ask, who is he?
Is he Indian?
Is he enrolled?
Because if he's not,
Tribal police don't have jurisdiction.
makes you never want to answer the phone.
We expect a full court press.
You'll get nothing less.
I'll have my staffer get started on this right away.
We really do think now is the time, before this year's election.
Well, of course.
The Republicans desperately need women voters.
Well, we can capitalize on that.
Is there someone you can reach out to across the aisle?
Craple's agreed to co-sponsor.
You're going to give this to a Republican?
Oh, Mike's good on Indian affairs.
Yeah, but it's...
Oh, trust me, Dennis. No one's going to listen to a Democrat from Vermont.
Okay.
I'll have my staffer send you a draft of what we put together.
And you're serious about this?
Are you? I mean, you're up here talking to me about how your women suffer from the highest rates of violence in the United States.
They do.
How tribes need jurisdiction to protect their women.
We do.
So where are your tribal leaders? If jurisdiction is so important to them, why aren't they here to talk to me about it? Didn't you tell me the relationship between tribal nations and the federal government is sovereign to sovereign?
It is.
Well, look, this is going to be an uphill battle. We can probably get through the Senate, but the House, well, let me put it this way. I don't see the path. If you want even the slightest chance of winning, you need to bring your leaders, and they need to speak directly to Congress.
I'm the first chief of the native village of Anvuk. I was born in our village. I'm the third child of 8. The day I was born, my father described that we were at a fishing camp and my mother was inside having me, and he had to wash up real quick from cutting several hundred subsistence salmon so he could help her. After I was born, he went right back to cutting the fish that my family would eat that winter. This is why we keep coming here to give testimony about the violence that continues to affect and wound my relatives every day. It's like washing up to help and going back to the day-to-day battle that we face in our small tribal community of Anvuk. The Anvuk tribe is a Degahitan Athabascan community with a rich history. We are located on the west bank of the Yukon River in the interior of Alaska. We are an isolated tribe with 378 enrolled members. Access to Anvuk is by small plane, boat, or snow machine. And at this point, we have no law enforcement.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with Alaska,
My wife, Tammy.
but only 3 or 4 troopers are responsible for protecting between 56 and 115 villages. When a call is received, they use criteria to rate whether they will come into your community. If there's a death, you will not get a very fast response. We also do not have 911.
Our children are often our first responders.
We had a suicide just a few months ago, and we called 3 different posts in 3 different communities to get a response. I and 2 others had to stand over the body for 5 hours to keep others from disturbing the scene.
I could still remember one day, there was a pregnant woman and her husband was drunk, beating on her. My sister and I had to jump on him, and we were about 12 years old.
Historically, the federal government and the state of Alaska have not allocated resources to Alaska Native tribes, including the villages in our region of the state.
We had no law enforcement then, and today it's still the same.
The Bureau of Indian Affairs maintains an unwritten policy to not fund law enforcement for tribes in Public Law 280 states based on the assumption that states provide law enforcement and justice services for the tribes. Alaska is not providing this protection.
And as a sovereign government, it is our inherent right to do so.
But how can we, when the United States has taken our inherent right to self-govern away and given it to a state that doesn't even respond to our calls for help?
We call on Congress to repeal Public Law 280.
We call on the United States to restore the jurisdiction it should have never taken.
We call on the United States Congress to fix the Supreme Court's decision in Venitai.
The Supreme Court says there's no Indian country in Alaska.
But no matter what the Supreme Court says, we are still here.
Well, we got the chair of the Judiciary Committee.
That's a good start. You gonna talk to next?
You and I are scheduled to meet with Senator Cornyn.
What?
I got us 2 tickets to DC for Monday. You're gonna walk the halls with me.
I think you're confused. I hired you, not the other way around.
I'm a lobbyist. I can't do this alone. I need a tribal leader, a representative of one of our sovereign nations to stand there and advocate with me.
Okay, but why me?
You're a woman.
A very busy woman with lots of work to do.
You're a tribal leader.
I'm no one special.
You're Councilwoman Henry.
Please, call me Terry.
The senator can't meet with you, so it'll be me today. I'm sorry, and you are?
Terry Henry. I serve on tribal council for the Eastern Band of Cherokee.
She's the co-chair for the National Congress of American Indians Committee on Violence Against Women.
Okay.
We're here to discuss the Lady Crapo, if you've had a chance to read the bill.
Look, I'm going to stop you right there and be honest with you. We're willing to stay as late as we need tonight to work this out.
What's on the table?
We'd like to propose some language. We brought our pajamas.
Guess I forgot mine.
You removed jurisdiction.
We replaced it with federal delegation.
That won't work.
It has to.
Congress needs to restore jurisdiction, not delegate it.
Congress can't recognize jurisdiction in Indian tribes.
Why not?
It's unconstitutional.
No, it's pre-constitutional. We existed as sovereign nations before you even had this document. You call it Constitution.
Terry?
The Supreme Court was clear in Oliphant. Tribes don't have jurisdiction. I mean, over non-natives. You, of course, have jurisdiction over your own people.
Just not your people.
If this is your attempt to charm the senator into voting for the bill, you're failing.
We've got the votes we need.
In the Senate, but not in the House.
I'm sorry, does Senator Cornyn get a vote in the House?
Look, we're here to negotiate a deal with you. And you want to negotiate with us, so you don't have to negotiate with Cantor.
I'd rather talk to Cantor.
Fine.
Thank you for your time.
You might pass the Senate, but you'll never pass the House.
We got to work on tone.
Tone?
We're asking people to give us something we want.
We're asking them to give us what they should never have taken.
I agree with that. But it's 2012, not 1877. We have to take what we can get.
There was a time.
Before now.
There was a time.
When we didn't have this kind of violence.
Not like we do now.
Our men knew to view women in a sacred manner.
Not to say that we lived in a perfect society.
Because we didn't.
But we certainly didn't live in a society where women are treated like this.
It was never
Like this.
They introduced it.
When the soldiers came to round us up.
To send us on the trail of tears.
When they first put us on the reservation.
When they forced us to go to their schools.
We had to
hide. We had to go to the fort.
To get our food.
to get our rations.
Our commodities.
From soldiers.
And when we went to the fort to get our food.
What's this?
I've come for my rations.
And we're all out.
Please, sir, I have children.
I said we're all out.
I have to feed my children.
Come in the back. Are you deaf? I said come in the back. You know, you don't get something for nothing around here. You want to feed your children. You come in the back.
My grandmother.
My grandmother.
Our grandmothers
They were raped
by the government agent
For food.
to feed their children.
Raped by the soldiers.
Just
Because
because
they could.
They had to run.
They had to hide.
They had no choice.
Our grandmother.
my grandmother.
They're survivors.
Survivors of war.
They weren't targeted because of the color of their skin.
We aren't targeted because of the color of our skin.
we are targeted because of who we are as Indian women.
As Native American women.
Alaskan Native women.
Because we're citizens of sovereign nations.
Because we're sovereign women.
It's been this way for 500 years.
Since the Russians came.
Since 1492.
Since
1978.
Since 1998.
We're still sovereign.
I wish I could say the war has ended.
But we live in conflict every day.
It's time to change.
Awful.
It's the truth.
I had no idea.
Senator Brown, do you have a minute?
This is coming from Crapo?
I'm in a rush.
Yes, from Crapo.
He's read the bill.
I'd like to talk to you about VAWA,
Senator Heller wants you to know
the tribal jurisdiction provision.
you have his vote.
Thank you.
You have my vote.
Relay Crapo?
Yes.
Thank you. Senator Collins?
Do I know you?
Dennis Whitehawk. I represent the Eastern Band of Cherokee.
You
And
want
you want to talk to me about VAWA?
Yes.
Well, I spoke to Patty.
We have some questions.
I liked her answers.
The tribal jurisdiction provision is very important.
You have my vote.
Thank you.
Senator McCain agrees.
Great.
You have his vote,
Thank you.
but he doesn't think you'll pass the House.
Senator Snowe.
We'd like to discuss VAWA.
Sure.
Jurisdiction is critical. Without it,
You have my vote
thank you.
and the vote of every Republican woman in the Senate.
That's great.
You look surprised.
I guess I didn't expect.
You didn't think a bunch of Republicans would support you on this? Let me tell you something. We may be Republicans, but first and foremost, we're women.
That's-
A lot of Republicans.
I talked to Brown,
I spoke to Snowe
McCain staffer.
and Heller.
They said yes.
We might have enough votes.
Senator Moran wanted me to tell you
No.
Senator Rubio, with all due respect,
you can't vote for this.
You won't change my mind.
Did he say why?
You can't negotiate with Cornyn. You can't negotiate with him.
let me get this straight.
Big government and inefficiency.
The tribal jurisdiction provision restores jurisdiction at the local level.
I'm sorry.
You're taking authority away from the state
I don't believe this.
and giving it to the feds.
That's not at all what we're doing.
I read the bill.
Senator Shelby wanted me to tell you
McCain's voting for it.
I'm Senator Lee, not McCain.
his vote is no.
Does he understand?
I'm late for a meeting.
Senator Toomey,
Yes.
I'd like to talk to you about VAWA.
Oh,
I have a meeting with Senator Wicker.
Well, he's not here.
The tribal jurisdiction provision is very important.
I understand your position, but
When will he be back?
I've made up my mind.
We said we would discuss VAWA.
I discussed it with him.
My vote is no.
He's against it.
Seriously?
I'm sorry. I can't help you.
We just don't agree here.
Thank you for your time.
Spoke to Kim Teehee,
Where's the White House?
fully on board.
That's great.
Lay says they're voting this week.
Do we have enough votes?
I don't know. I'm worried we don't.
Senator Murray,
I hear what you're saying.
we have a right to this water.
Everyone says they have a right to the water.
Yes, but this water is ours. We signed a treaty with you, your government.
Let me see what I can do.
Thank you.
Deborah, one more thing.
Yeah?
VAWA,
Okay.
I need to be honest with you. Sean, I need you to tell Deborah everything you told me. Everything.
Well, the vote's likely to happen in the next day or so.
That's great.
The tribal jurisdiction provision won't be in it.
What?
Been taken out.
Well, what about the immigrant provision?
Well, still in there,
LGBTQ?
still in.
You realize we have tribal members who are LGBTQ.
Sure.
They won't be protected. Without jurisdiction, VAWA will do nothing to protect them on tribal lands.
We don't have the votes.
If we fight for tribal jurisdiction now, we'll lose the whole thing.
We can't afford to lose the entire VAWA.
What about my women? My citizens? The women I represent?
We're so sorry.
We wrote letters. We came here to speak.
It's been decided.
There must be something we can do.
I could hold a press conference.
You think that would make a difference?
It would if you agreed to speak.
I'm not a policy analyst.
You're a tribal leader.
Yes, but
You could share your story,
you don't know my story.
but you have one. You're in here talking to me about your treaty rights. Isn't that what VAWA is all about? It really is my honor to introduce you, Vice Councilwoman Deborah Parker. Very courageous in coming forward today to talk personally about why this is so very important for her and so many other Native American women.
Thank you, Senator Murray, Senator Boxer, and Senator Klobuchar. Good morning. My name is Deborah Parker. I'm an enrolled member of the Tulalip tribes of the state of Washington, where I currently serve as the vice chair of the tribe. Yesterday, I shared with Senator Murray the reasons why the Violence Against Women's Act is so important to our Native American women. I did not expect to be sharing my own story. I am a Native American statistic. I am a survivor of sexual and physical violence. My story starts in the 70s as a toddler. You may wonder, how do I remember when this occurred? I was the size of a couch cushion. A red velvet, approximately 2.5 foot couch cushion. One of the many girls violated and attacked by a man that had no boundaries or regards for a little child's life, or mine. The man responsible was never convicted. In the early 80s, at a young age, I was asked to babysit my auntie's children. During the late hours of the evening, she arrived, but was not alone. Instead of packing my things to go home, my sense was to quickly grab the children. The 4 or 5 men that followed my auntie home raped her. I had to protect the children and hide. I could not save my auntie. I only heard her cries. Today is the first time I have ever shared this story. She died at a young age. The perpetrators were never prosecuted. A majority of our girls have struggled with sexual and domestic violence, not once, but repeatedly. My question for Congress has and will always be, why did you not protect me?
Why didn't you protect my family?
My auntie.
My mother.
My daughter.
Me.
I'm urging Congress to uphold the US Constitution.
Honor our treaty agreements.
Recognize our sovereignty.
Restore our jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you need, Deb?
Need?
You had anything to eat?
I'm fine.
You've been at it for days now, and I haven't seen you eat a thing.
I'm not hungry.
I brought you a sandwich.
What do you think of this sentence? The tribal jurisdiction provision in the reauthorization of VAWA 2013 recognizes the rights of our Native women to be free of violence and abuse, as well as the inherent sovereign authority of tribes to protect their own citizens.
Sounds good to me.
Too many commas.
I think it's fine.
People stop listening when you use too many commas.
I don't think people hear commas.
I hear commas. I hear them all the time. They bother me. You're a lawyer. Didn't you spend years studying where to place commas?
I was tribal police before law school, and we never used commas. And my dad, he was obsessed with commas. Whenever he wrote an opinion or an order, he'd spend hours revising, deleting commas, adding commas. He always said judicial orders must command respect.
He was a tribal judge?
Never got to sleep in on Saturday mornings because he would drag me out of bed and throw me in the car. He would take me with him to court. And on the way, he'd make me read. Back then, to have a legal case, it was a printout of a book. So we'd drive, and sometimes it was several hours. He'd say, read this to me. And I'd read the case to him, and he'd say, what do you think that means? He was teaching me at a very young age to respect the law.
I've thought about going to law school.
Don't.
You went.
I had to.
Your dad made you go.
Y'all don't have the TV on?
No,
What the heck are you doing in here?
we were talking.
For crying out loud, turn on C-SPAN.
In a minute, I need to concentrate.
They voted.
What?
We won.
Oh my God.
We got 68.
We just passed the Senate.
Thank you.
You don't got to thank me. Okay, we're hugging.
We won.
We still have to pass the House.
I gotta call my husband. My kids.
You didn't think we'd do it.
I didn't think we had the votes.
We didn't until the last second.
How long did it take for me to convince you this campaign would be worth it?
I didn't need any convincing. You had me at OCO.
When I was born in 1958, Alaska wasn't a state. It was and always has been my home. Growing up, I didn't speak English until I was 12. My first day at the BIA school, the teacher told me, never speak Athabascan. You speak English. When I spoke my native language, the teacher would slap my mouth with a ruler or my hands. Sometimes she would pull our hair or our ears. At first, I was shocked. The BIA school was the first time I ever saw violence. No one did that to me at home. One day after I got my ear pulled, I ran home to my mom and I told her, I'm never going back. They hit me. They hit me if I speak my language and I don't ever want to go back. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, you have to. If you don't, they'll take you away and I might never see you again. I learned at a very young age that if I was quiet, I was safe. As a kid, they taught us. For Native Alaskans, silence was our only safety. I started doing this work in 1978. My mother died as a result of domestic violence and her husband got away with it. He was never prosecuted. For Native women in Alaska, Indian country isn't a legal or even an academic question. It's life or death.
Tom, it's good to see you.
Congrats on passing the Senate.
Thank you.
I hear you're representing the Eastern Band.
Yes.
You forget you're from Oklahoma?
Oh, don't worry. I still got my twang.
Good to hear.
So, how do we get Lady Crapo through the House with tribal jurisdiction in it?
I'm not sure we can.
That's not what I wanted to hear.
Boehner assigned Cantor to VAWA, and he's opposed to sovereignty.
Based on what?
I think the Constitution.
Where in the Constitution does it say tribes no longer have jurisdiction?
You don't have to convince me. You have to convince Cantor.
So what does he think?
It's going to be difficult.
But he thinks we can do it.
He's a congressman, not a prophet.
Someone needs sleep.
Or a Red Bull.
We need to go where we're most powerful.
Our survivors.
Hard to tell a survivor she doesn't deserve justice.
Our stories are powerful.
Do you think they'd agree?
To come up here?
Lisa Bruner would.
Yes.
She stood up and spoke out in 2003 when tribal leadership wanted to ignore the issue.
What about Shara Giles?
Yes.
Melissa Merrick?
Diane Millich?
And our sisters in Alaska.
Nettie Warbelow.
Lenora Hooch.
Shirley Moses.
How do we get them here?
Let me see what I can do.
At first, I wasn't sure.
What would my family think of me?
What would my tribe think of me?
Why me?
Shouldn't they be asking someone else?
And so when she asked me,
When Terry said,
come to DC.
Will you speak out?
I really had to think if that was going to be right for me.
would I be comfortable doing that?
I was mainly thinking about protecting my 3 daughters, especially my youngest one. She had no idea that I'd ever had to live my life in such a way. She's maybe seen these kinds of things on TV or in movies, but she didn't know these things happen in real life to people, to real people that she knows.
I wanted to protect her.
Shield her.
I didn't want her to know.
But I can't shield her from everything.
She's already dating.
Could end up in a relationship with a young man that's not enrolled.
A non-Indian.
And if he were to mistreat her?
Would I be okay knowing that I didn't do whatever I could to help keep her safe?
No.
So I said yes.
I said yes.
I agreed to go to DC.
I agreed to share my story.
But I was diagnosed with lupus last week, and I start chemotherapy in a few days.
Diane, I don't know what to say.
I'm not asking for sympathy.
If you can't come.
No, I'm coming. This is a serious illness, but this also is very important.
Thank you. This will make a difference for all Native women.
I never told Terry this, but I didn't agree to share my story for her or even for the other women.
I did this for my family.
I did this for my auntie.
I did
this for the next generation. I did
this for my daughter. My daughter was raped this past summer. Even though they wore bandanas, my daughter recognized their white skin and blonde hair. They were doing what I called hunting on our reservation. Non-natives know they can come onto our lands and rape and abuse our women with impunity. My daughter was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. She didn't come and tell me right away. She watched and she hid it. That summer, we had another little girl who was raped. Nothing was done. The state did nothing. So she hung herself. Our suicide rate on our reservation is quite huge, as it is in all of Indian country. So my daughter, hearing all of the stories about this little girl being raped and her death, she finally broke and told me what had happened to her. And my daughters know better. They don't go try to party. We know the dangers of our environment, and they know that. And they know that we're a walking bullseyes. We're not just targets. We are walking bullseyes. And so she went out in the middle of the night to go find my niece. She didn't want my niece to get in trouble for being out late because she would have. And as my daughter walked down the road, 4 white men in a black SUV with tan leather interior were trying to get her into the vehicle. And she said no. She just kept walking. And this is the only biggest town that we have on a reservation. Population maybe 1,200. And she's walking, and they're getting more persistent. And she takes off running. And they chased her down. 2 guys. They jumped out of the vehicle and they drug her to it. So 1 was driving, 2 held her down, and the 4th one raped her. And they had bandanas on over their face, but she's seen their white skin and blue eyes and their blonde hair. And when they were done, they threw her out by the bridge. And as a mom, that more than took the wind out of me. It slammed me to the earth with ungodly speed. And all the measures that I had tried to protect her didn't work. My daughter isn't an animal to be hunted. We are human beings.
Well, if it isn't the gentleman from Oklahoma.
I hope I'm not intruding.
Oh, no, my 3 o'clock was canceled. Well, sit down.
I won't be long.
VAWA's making me a popular man. I've got Joe Biden bearing down my door, beating on it, and every woman in the house wants to tell me what she thinks.
They're in favor.
Well, not all of them.
You know where I stand.
I do, and I wish I could help you. But I've got 2 committee chairmen blocking the Senate bill, and they won't budge.
Hastings? Yeah,
Well, I tell you this, if you convince Hastings to vote for tribal jurisdiction, I'll send it to the floor.
You and I both know that'll never happen.
Well, feel free to come back if it does.
Cantor's bill removes jurisdiction and replaces it with federal delegation.
That won't work.
But it'll pass.
What if you drafted a bill?
Me?
You're a popular guy. People take you seriously.
Not on Indian issues. Folks will say, well, that's just another one of Tom Cole's Indian bills.
I disagree.
If I draft the bill, it'll be dead in the water.
We don't have a lot of options here. It's not like I can ask a Democrat to draft this.
Ask Isa.
Daryl Issa?
He's Lebanese, not Chickasaw. That's like a whole different tribe.
Seriously, why Issa?
He's a strong supporter of the tribes, and he's on the chair of the Oversight Committee.
That committee has nothing to do with this.
Exactly. That committee exists purely to torture the president. He's overseeing all the investigations that look into Obama, including Benghazi. So we've got ourselves a bona fide, respected Republican partisan. If Daryl Issa's name is first on the bill, folks will look at it.
Okay. Fine. Could you just check with him and see if he'd be willing to do it?
I already did. He said yes.
Did you have a nice Christmas? Hard to believe it's 2013.
Time goes by fast around here.
I didn't go home for the holidays, just stayed here and worked straight through. I figure I'll go home and see my kids after we win the House. There will be plenty of time for family when we win.
Cantor refused to put it to a vote.
What?
He let the bill expire.
The bill is dead.
We'll reintroduce it. Lehigh already has a draft going.
What good will that do?
If we can pass it before the end of January, it'll be back in the House by the 1st of February.
We could pass it in the Senate for every year for 50 years. That won't get it through the House.
I know you're disappointed.
I'm going home.
Deborah.
I haven't seen my kids in 3 months.
This isn't defeat.
What do I tell my tribe? I haven't been to a council meeting in months, and now I'm going to lose my reelection.
You tell them that Patty Murray says 1 month from now, we'll have VAWA 2013 passed in the Senate.
And then what?
You have momentum. Don't stop now.
Murray and Lay think they can have a vote by the end of January.
That's fast.
They have the votes.
And we don't. Tell them to slow down.
We have momentum.
90 mile an hour down a dead end curve gets you nowhere.
We just have to convince Cantor to put it to a vote.
And he's convinced it's unconstitutional.
What's unconstitutional about recognizing a tribe's jurisdiction?
Oliphant.
Are you kidding me? Have you read Oliphant?
100 times. And it doesn't make any sense to me. How do you explain the court's decision that after hundreds of years of sovereign existence, a sovereign existence that predates the United States Constitution, that all of a sudden in 1978, tribal governments lost their sovereignty? Poof. I guess it just disappeared.
I used to watch my dad preside over tribal court.
My great-grandfather was clerk of our Chickasaw Supreme Court.
We prosecuted everyone. Indian, non-Indian, white, French, Chinese, it didn't matter.
If you committed a crime on the reservation, the tribe could prosecute you.
When I was in college, My sister Rachel, she was working at the casino over in Red Rock. And this guy, when my sister finished her shift, he followed her into the parking lot and raped her. And when he was done with her, he left her on the ground and drove off. But she saw his license plate. Joseph Jefferson, 34-year-old white male chemical engineer living in Nichols Hills. She got his license plate.
Ask your sister to speak. Congress needs to hear her story.
She killed herself. 6 months after the rape, when we figured out our tribe didn't have jurisdiction to prosecute him. And he came back to the casino and started stalking her. So you're just going to accept this?
What do you want me to do?
Prosecute this man. You're a judge. Issue an order. Have the police arrest him.
I can't.
We have his license plate.
Dennis.
We know his name, where he works.
He's
we know where
white.
he lives.
We don't have jurisdiction.
I'll offend.
Read it.
I'm not a lawyer.
I said, read it.
We granted certiorari. I don't even know how to pronounce it.
Read the full sentence.
We granted certiorari to decide whether Indian tribal courts have criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians. We decide they do not.
What do you think that means?
It meant I had to go to law school.
Did you read the entire opinion?
Yeah, my dad made me.
Read the last sentence.
Finally, we are not unaware of the prevalence of non-Indian crime on today's reservations, which the tribes forcefully argue requires the ability to try non-Indians. But these are considerations for Congress to weigh in deciding whether Indian tribes should be authorized to try non-Indians.
What do you think that means?
Congress has the constitutional power to restore the inherent jurisdiction of Indian tribes.
You go back and tell Patty Murray that if she and Leahy can get through the Senate, I'll do whatever the hell it takes to pass the House.
Leahy's reintroducing the bill on Monday.
Murray thinks they'll have it passed by February 1st.
Not a bit past.
She thinks we have momentum.
But we need buzz in the press.
I know a reporter at the Times.
Would he be willing to write about VAWA?
She.
Maybe you could ask her.
Ms. Milich, thank you for taking my call. I'm with the Times. The New York Times. I don't think your phone is working.
Can you hear me now? Sorry about that.
Yes, thank you. Dennis Whitehawk gave me your name.
Oh, he's been doing that a lot lately.
I'm writing an article about the tribal jurisdiction provision in the proposed reauthorization of VAWA. Would you be willing to share your story?
Yes. I was born on the Southern Ute Indian Reservation. My mother was a Southern Ute and my dad was a first-generation Yugoslavian. When I was 36, I married a white man, believing he would treat me the same way my father treated my mother. He moved onto the reservation and lived with me, but we weren't married very long before he became extremely violent. The brutality increased after I left and filed for divorce and an order of protection. One day after the Southern Ute Tribal Court awarded my order of protection, I was at work when I saw him pull up in our red truck. My ex-husband walked inside our office and he told me, "You promised us until death do us part, so death it shall be." He was armed with a 9mm gun. If not for my very brave coworker, I would not be alive today. My coworker prevented my murder by pushing me out of harm's way. My coworker took the bullet in his shoulder. The shooting took place at a Federal Bureau of Land Management land site where we both worked. The jurisdictional issues were so complicated that after the shooting, the Southern Ute Tribal Police, the Colorado State Patrol, our county sheriff, the City of Durango Police, and federal agents, all 6 agencies stood there with measuring tapes and maps.
I got 5.
I got 4.
This is clearly federal.
Are you kidding me?
Take a look.
You're at least 6 inches away.
The bullet landed on federal.
The gun was fired from the state.
Yeah, but where's the body? Not in the state.
It took hours just to decide who had jurisdiction.
Look, if you want it, take it.
No, we don't need the feds' leftovers.
This is small potatoes for the feds.
Southern Ute says they want to prosecute.
Are you kidding me? They don't have jurisdiction.
The district attorney of Colorado decided that the 6th Judicial District would prosecute the case.
I'd like to offer a plea agreement.
What's on the table?
Attempted voluntary manslaughter.
How about aggravated driving under revocation?
For driving without a license?
Well, he didn't have his license when he was arrested.
But he tried to kill someone.
He's a first-time offender.
He has a history of domestic violence.
Oh, on the reservation. You and I both know that doesn't count. Get him for aggravated driving under revocation and you can still look tough. Show you took a stand against someone who put the lives of your police force in danger.
No one ever asked me, the victim, what did I need to feel safe?
I'm telling you, aggravated driving under revocation, and then we all go home happy.
Okay.
My tribe, they wanted to prosecute, but because of Oliphant, they couldn't. It was like his attempt to shoot me, and the shooting of my coworker never happened. In the end, he was right. The law couldn't touch him. He was above the law.
Thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
We passed the Senate.
I knew we would.
We got 78.
That's 10 more than last year.
10 Republicans switched over.
It's amazing.
Diane's story in the Times.
It was powerful.
That's where those 10 votes came from.
So now we just need to win the House.
Lord save us.
I need some caffeine.
I got coffee.
Dennis doesn't drink coffee.
You don't drink coffee?
No. Yeah, that stuff's bad for you.
I also brought bagels.
Dennis doesn't eat bagels.
Oh.
He only eats hippie granola stuff.
They're called Cliff Bars, and they're really good for you. No corn syrup, no processed ingredients.
He went to law school in Northern California.
All right. So we need to figure out the schedule for this week.
Juana's setting up a meeting with the Black Caucus.
Thank God for Gwen Moore.
You said you meet with Pelosi.
I did?
Yes, we discussed this.
Okay.
I'll be stalking Kathy McMorris Rogers.
What about Betty McCollum?
On my list.
I got McHenry and Denham.
Paul Cook?
Talking to him tomorrow morning.
Who's checking in with Isa?
That's me.
Don't forget, you've got Cole.
I think he's got me.
Well, whatever you Oklahoma boys share, it's special, I'm sure.
Who's got the press?
I'm with the Washington Post.
The Los Angeles Times.
You have a minute?
Yes.
I read Diane Milch's story.
It's powerful.
I'd like to hear yours.
Why are you here?
Speak out.
To share my story.
To stop the silence.
Why are you advocating for jurisdiction?
1 out of 3 Native women will be raped in her lifetime.
60% of Native women will be assaulted in their lifetime.
Alaska Native women experience the highest rates of violence in the United States.
Our women.
Our children.
We're not safe.
What happened?
My husband tried to shoot me.
He threatened to drown me.
Said he would kill me.
My coworker took a bullet in his shoulder.
Unbelievable.
The majority of violent crimes committed against Native women are committed by a non-Native.
They come to our reservations because they know they can abuse our women.
They know they're safe.
They're protected.
By the law.
By the Supreme Court's decision in Binitai.
Did you call
Did you call the police?
Doesn't help.
They can't do anything.
They don't have jurisdiction.
on your reservation?
According to the Supreme Court, because I am a Native woman living on my tribe's lands.
Because we have no Indian country.
The law won't protect me.
What kind of message does that send to our women?
I know what message it sent to me.
I don't understand.
If the violence is so bad,
If you aren't safe on your reservation,
if he lives in your home, and
your home is dangerous.
why don't you leave?
Why don't you leave?
Wouldn't the laws of the state protect you if you leave your reservation?
My great-great-great-grandfather was Wayagadoga, or Standing Wolf. During the time of the removal, the soldiers came to take him and his family to force them to walk the Trail of Tears. At that time, a white man named George Hayes was living with the Cherokee people. My grandfather asked Hayes what he could do to avoid going west and be allowed to remain in his homeland. Hayes advised him to save up all of his food rations, and when he saw the opportunity to break away and make his way back home, but not to be caught, because that could mean severe punishment or death. One day, several weeks later, Hayes was out working in his yard and he saw a small group of people approaching on the horizon. It was Standing Wolf, his wife, and she held a small newborn baby. Standing Wolf told George Hayes that his new son was named Waya Uchanti, or Comeback Wolf, because that was their only wish, to come back home. This is the story of why I and my grandmothers and grandfathers before me came to be here in these mountains in Western North Carolina. The Cherokee elders say that we have always been here. We will always be here. It's believed that we were given our home here in these mountains by Creator. And since it was Creator who gave it to us, only He can take it from us. So did I ever think of leaving Cherokee?
No.
Not once.
Never.
This is my home.
And I'll never leave my home.
Kathy McMorris Rogers, didn't expect to see you today.
I'm on my way to ENC.
Thanks for stopping by.
Believe me, I'd rather be here visiting with you than sitting in committee.
What can I do for you?
I met with some of the women and I heard their stories.
They're powerful.
How do we get this passed?
It's up to Cantor.
I mean, how do we convince him to put jurisdiction to a vote?
I tried.
Stubborn as hell.
I'm sure it'd help if he heard from you directly.
Let me see what I can do.
I think I know what you're here to discuss.
Then let's discuss it.
I'm not putting it to a vote.
Did you read the New York Times article?
Are you kidding me? I have standards.
I hate the press as much as you do.
Well, you're the one quoting it.
This is about perception. Look, 53% of the voters in the last election were women. Exit polls showed that Obama held a 10-point gender gap over Romney.
I've heard the numbers.
If you refuse to put VAWA to a vote now, like you did last year, there will be consequences for all of us.
You know, I'm here because I don't want to have this conversation over email.
We need a vote.
You think you can just pull the camel's nose under the tent?
No one's nose is going under any tents.
Well, they got your nose, that's for sure.
What's that supposed to mean?
You're supposed to be our guy working with them.
I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm their guy working with you. My great-great-great-grandfather was one of the last to travel the Chickasaw Trail of Tears. He was only 14, walked 80 miles. From 1837 to 1851, the federal government moved everyone. We lost everything except our sovereignty. After we got to our new home in Indian Territory, my great-great-grandfather served as a clerk of the Chickasaw Supreme Court. And after him, my great-grandfather served as the last Chickasaw treasurer before Oklahoma became a state. And my mother was the first Native American woman ever elected to the state Senate in Oklahoma. I come from a long line of Cherokee leaders, men and women, who served not only their sovereign tribal government, but also the state of Oklahoma and the United States. I have a lot of respect for this government, this sovereign government, and how it works. And it works because people vote. They vote in the presidential election and in the state elections. And here in the House, we vote. When a bill passes, it passes. When it doesn't get enough votes, it fails. But no one ever has to guess whether a majority of the citizens' representatives were for or against a bill when there's a vote. That's all we're asking for. That's all we want. Please, let us have the vote.
Dinio galaladi, dinio galaladi, dinio galaladi, Juno du Ioane Hesti. Dinio galaladi, dinio galaladi, dinio galaladi, Juno du Ioane Hesti.
They're voting.
I remember where I was.
I remember what I was doing.
I remember what I was thinking.
And I will never forget.
I was on the floor of the House.
At my home in Fairfax.
On my reservation.
In Cherokee.
In Alaska.
Tulalip.
Watching CNN.
C-SPAN.
Look. Watching the vote.
Working for votes.
I couldn't breathe.
I was so nervous.
All I could do is pray.
What's the vote?
30.
Yeah, 30.
We need 218.
We need your vote.
You got my vote.
31.
Thank you.
62.
My whole life.
I dreamt of this.
85.
I prayed for this.
114.
You got my vote, Tom.
Thank you.
115.
Everything depends on this.
What if we lose?
Can't lose.
Not an option.
201.
201?
Oh my God.
I just prayed.
To Creator.
215.
Holy smokes.
216.
We got this.
217.
Is this for real?
218.
We did it.
218.
218.
They're still coming.
More votes.
235.
236.
250.
285.
286.
286?
286.
286 votes.
I couldn't believe it.
It didn't feel real.
I had to call Jax.
Carrie texted me.
I just started texting.
I just started crying.
I could hardly see who I was texting. I was crying so hard.
I had to scream.
I scared my neighbors.
I did a victory dance.
I prayed for my sisters.
It just felt unreal.
It felt like a dream.
It was
It
amazing.
was amazing.
It was humbling.
It was a miracle.
Wait. They removed Alaska.
What?
Alaska's been carved out.
Section 904.
Jurisdiction is limited to crimes committed in Indian country.
What's that mean?
It's a reference to Venati.
Supreme Court case.
1998, the court declared that Indian country no longer exists in Alaska.
But there are 229 federally recognized tribes in Alaska.
And now none of them have jurisdiction.
Except Metlakatla.
One tribe.
And the other 228 are out.
We were told jurisdiction would be restored to all tribes.
I was told Alaska wouldn't be left out.
Indian country.
You think they just forgot about Venati?
Congress? No.
They know the significance of the words Indian country.
They knew what they were doing.
Though Congress passed a tribal jurisdiction provision they knew wouldn't restore jurisdiction to tribes in Alaska.
Someone lied to us.
Unbelievable.
We have to fix this.
I have to call Nettie. Nettie, tribes in Alaska were carved out.
We were told that we would be included in this.
Murkowski got rid of Section 910, but no one objected to the Indian country language in 904.
So they referenced Vinitai.
I am so sorry.
How do they justify this?
They keep saying Alaska is different.
I read about your people. Before I met you, I'd never known anyone who was Cherokee. But I read about your Trail of Tears in 1839. I read about how the federal government took your homes and forced you to walk thousands of miles. I read that many became sick and died. Everyone keeps saying, sorry, Nettie, we can't include the tribes in Alaska in this bill. Sorry, Nettie, we'll protect Alaska Native women next time. Sorry, Nettie, Alaska is different. What makes us different? Because what happened to your people in 1839 didn't happen to us until 1959? Because Congress passed the Dawes Act and gave your land to white settlers in 1887, but didn't pass ANCSA and give away our lands until 1971? Because the Supreme Court took away your jurisdiction in Oliphant, but didn't take away ours until it decided Vinitai. Please, someone, explain to me how we are different. Because from where I stand, I see our stories as the same.
You aren't different.
We are the same.
And I stand with you.
I stand with you.
I stand with you. I stand
We
with
all stand with you.
We all stand.
We all stand with you.
That was 7 years ago.
And 2 years ago,
In 2018,
VAWA came up again for reauthorization.
And in 2018,
Americans, we elected the first 2 Native women to Congress in the history of the United States.
Deb Holland and Sharice Davids.
I cried.
Screamed.
I hugged my daughter.
And then we watched.
as Congresswoman Deb Haaland advocated for the reauthorization of VAWA.
and further restoration of tribal jurisdiction.
The jurisdiction we need to keep our women and children safe.
Congresswoman Holland, please have a seat.
Thank you.
Congratulations on becoming one of the first Native women to serve in the U.S. Congress.
It's an honor to serve.
We have a lot of priorities in Indian country: economic development, sacred sites, healthcare.
I want to work on VAWA.
VAWA 2013 was historic.
It wasn't enough.
I agree.
It only covers domestic and dating violence, doesn't cover sexual violence, stalking, or sex trafficking. Right now, our Native women and girls are trafficked at rates higher than any other population in the US.
Sounds like you want to restore additional categories of non-Indian tribal criminal jurisdiction.
I want to work together and build on what you accomplished in 2013.
You have a draft?
We are working with Sheila Jackson Lee and Gwen Moore.
Obstruction of justice, sexual violence, sex trafficking, stalking, and assault of a law enforcement officer or corrections officer.
Non-Indian abusers are assaulting our tribal law enforcement when they answer a Native woman's 911 call. And right now, because of Oliphant, our tribal police can't arrest someone who attacks them when they're trying to protect a Native woman.
This is a serious problem.
And we have to address the Indian country problem in Alaska.
I hated they were left out in 2013.
This draft includes them.
That's great.
Do you think we can do it?
Well, we sort of have the opposite of what we had in 2013. In 2013, we had a Democratic Senate and a Democratic president with a Republican House. Now we got a Republican president and a Republican Senate with a Democratic House.
We've got more than enough votes to pass in the House.
No doubt, but we're going to have to think about how we're going to get this through the Senate.
What do you suggest we do?
Talk to Murkowski. I know she wants to get this done. The rates of violence in Alaska are off the charts.
We'll talk to her.
Safety for Native women isn't a partisan issue. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. As a federal lawmaker, it is our federal trust, duty, and obligation to restore tribal sovereignty and ensure safety for Native women.
I agree.
We can't let safety for Native women become a political football.
We won't. The stakes are too high to keep the status quo in place.
On April 2nd, 2019.
The House passed H.R. 1585.
A bipartisan bill that, if passed by the Senate and signed by President Trump, would restore tribal criminal jurisdiction over sexual assault, child abuse, sex trafficking, and much more.
H.R. 1585 was a huge victory.
But then we got to the Senate.
I've drafted my own version, my own amendment that we can pass in the Senate along with the House version of the bill.
H.R. 1585?
Yes.
We appreciate your support, Senator Murkowski.
The goal is to directly address this Indian country issue in Alaska. This amendment makes clear that all tribes in Alaska would have the right, the authority to implement VAWA's restored tribal criminal jurisdiction.
This language is really good.
My staff vetted it with the Alaska Native Women's Resource Center.
Amazing.
So we could do this.
We could get VAWA 2019 passed and restore jurisdiction to Alaskan tribes.
Well, you got to get through the Senate and the Judiciary Committee specifically.
There are a lot of Republicans that support tribal jurisdiction and safety for Native women.
McSally.
Crapo.
Gardner.
Daines.
Yes.
Remember the MIW march in Montana?
Other senators send their staff. Daines came himself.
He wore red and marched in front, showing the whole world he stands with Indian country.
Let's talk to Daines.
You need to talk to Ernst. McConnell assigned VAWA to her. This won't pass the Senate unless it passes through her.
Good to see you all today. What can I do for you?
We'd like to discuss Senator Ernst's position on VAWA.
Oh, she's definitely for it, 100%.
That's great.
She'll pass H.R. 1585?
The House version?
Yes. That's the bipartisan bill that passed the House on April 2nd, 2019.
No. She's drafting her own version.
Her own version.
Yes.
Can we read that?
Oh, it's not ready.
Can you tell us what it's going to say?
We're still working on it.
Is there a problem with the House version that both Congressman Tom Cole and Congresswoman Deb Haaland signed off on?
Well, I can assure you, Senator Ernst is very concerned about safety for Native women. She's taking VAWA 2013 and expanding it, going in a better direction.
Better?
What exactly are you changing?
Oh, we'll send you our language once it's ready.
2 months later.
Okay, we got it.
Republican staffer leaked the current draft to us.
So this is what they're working on.
Yep.
Holy smokes.
The bill turns tribal jurisdiction into federal jurisdiction.
It gives non-Indian abusers the right to seek their criminal prosecution at any point in proceedings, regardless of the victim's right and safety.
This says DOJ can issue regulations on the exercise of tribal jurisdiction?
Can they do that to the states?
No.
This gives the non-Indian abusers the right to sue tribal officials simply because they were prosecuted in a tribal court for their criminal conduct.
Abusers will have a heyday with that.
This doesn't expand on VAWA 2013.
This destroys it.
I think that was the goal.
What do we do?
Go back to Ernst.
So, what do you think?
This is
Unacceptable.
Senator Ernst's bill restores the same categories of criminal jurisdiction as the House version.
Yes, but you've added so many pages of restrictions on that jurisdiction, diminishments of sovereignty, limitations. No tribe will ever be able to do this.
I wouldn't call them limitations.
There are limitations on the sovereignty of our tribal nations.
Well, they're protections.
They don't protect Native women, that's for sure.
They protect Americans.
I'm sorry, who are you?
I work for Senator Cornyn.
Did you draft this?
Senator Cornyn is very concerned about the due process rights of individual American citizens.
Do you place these same limitations on state courts?
I don't know.
You don't. For a federal court to overturn the conviction of a defendant in a state court, that defendant has to first exhaust his state court remedies.
He has to take his case all the way up to the state Supreme Court before asking another sovereign, the federal court, to overturn his state court conviction.
What the fancy attorneys over here are trying to say is that right now, habeas corpus works the same in state court as it does in tribal court. But this would change that and make it so that non-Indian defendants could escape tribal court jurisdiction altogether and go straight to federal court.
Right.
You wrote it that way on purpose?
Yes.
But that's completely anti-tribal sovereignty.
This is a giant step back from VAWA 2013.
It's necessary to protect the constitutional rights of individual Americans.
They are constitutional rights.
Yes.
Are tribal courts violating their constitutional rights?
I'm not here to debate hypotheticals.
It's only hypothetical because you have no concrete examples.
The United States Constitution doesn't apply to tribal courts.
And the French Constitution doesn't apply in Texas. It's called sovereignty.
Harry.
It's been 6 years. 6 years since VAWA 2013 was passed and our tribe started prosecuting non-Indians who abuse our Native women. Do you have a single example of a tribal court violating the due process rights of a non-Indian?
American citizens have a right to an attorney when they've been accused of a crime. This bill protects that.
VAWA 2013 requires that. That's in VAWA 2013.
What's in VAWA 2013?
Have you read VAWA 2013?
I didn't come here to be insulted.
Maybe you should read VAWA 2013 before you try to change it.
I don't think we're going to reach agreement here.
Dinio galaladi, dinio galaladi, dinio galaladi, Juno du iawane hesti.
It's now 2020.
VAWA passed the House in April of 2019.
It still hasn't passed the Senate.
The VAWA 2013 tribal jurisdiction provision.
It's a step in the right direction.
It's an enormous victory.
It only covers domestic violence.
And protection orders.
It doesn't cover rape.
It doesn't cover child abuse.
It doesn't cover what happened to my daughter.
It protects me.
It protects me.
It protects me.
But it doesn't protect me.
It's 2020.
And we need to reauthorize VAWA.
VAWA 2013 was a miracle.
A spiritual
miracle.
It's a step in the right direction.
But it's just a sliver.
The first sliver of restoration.
The first sliver of a full moon.
The end. Should we have the actors come on and do a quick curtain call just so everyone?
Yes.
Can all the
Yes, we
actors
should.
turn your videos off? And I just want to give a huge round of applause to these amazing actors. I'm looking at Natalie Standing Cloud, who played Deborah Parker, Lisa Bruner, who played herself. Give a wave to the audience. Terry Henry, played by Delana Studi. Derek Garza, who played many folks in the play, an ensemble role. Billy Joe Rich, who played herself. Nettie Warbelow was played by Candace Bird. And Ella Dershowitz, who played many different roles in the play. Diane Milich, who played herself. And Kenneth Ruthhart, who played Tom Cole. Liz Francis, who played many folks, the most important of which, of course, was Congresswoman Deb Haaland. And and we also have Craig here, who played many folks as well, and another amazing ensemble role. And last but not least, Enrico Nassi, who played Dennis Whitehawk. So just wanted to give some love to all of the incredible actors before we jump into the talkback panel. Thank you all so much.
I'm giving a virtual standing ovation. It was a powerful performance. Thank you so much to all the advocates and actors and Mary Kathryn and everyone. It was just an incredible performance. Thanks so much for sharing it with us. Well, we are so thrilled that we are going to do a panel with the playwright, Mary Kathryn Nagle, and Congresswoman Deb Haaland, who has joined, who was portrayed in the play. And we will take questions, but do it in the Q&A, not the chat function. And so I just want to, and as we said, Congresswoman Haaland was one of the first 2 Native American women elected to Congress only a couple years ago. There were never any Native women in Congress, and she represents the 1st District of New Mexico. Congresswoman, we're thrilled to have you here. And I wanted to just start with you. Any opening remarks that you want to make about the current status of Indigenous women, legislation, violence against women that you would like to make?
Well, thank you. It was amazing. And I'm so grateful for you, Mary Kathryn. You're really bringing a voice to these issues. And I have to say that I am the mom of a theater major. My daughter Selma graduated from UNM with her theater degree. And so you can bet that I was a mom who went to every single one of her performances, and she really is the one who I mean, I wasn't raised to enjoy the performing arts, but because of my daughter, I've been given that gift. And this was so amazing. I'm grateful to every single one of you for just having this, performing this with such passion. And I just want you to know that, I feel like being a member of Congress, I'm a Pueblo woman first, so I bring my perspective to the job. And, some folks, I've been shown on camera crying because this is a very emotional place to be. And when you have women, and Mary Kathryn, you know this because we've been at a panel together or a hearing together. I think that, part of being here and part of working to get legislation passed, we have to make sure that people know and understand that there are lives behind the work that we do. And I was grateful to get 2 bills across the finish line, the Not Invisible Act of 2019 and Savannah's Act. We, a lot of us worked very hard, and we have some wonderful allies here, as you have made, conveyed through this play. But I feel like I was feeling a little, I guess, not disappointed, but I took a little bit of issue with the president who signed these bills into law, not grasping the fact that women died and women were abused, and the United States didn't live up to its trust responsibility in the right ways. And that's why we needed to pass laws like this. But we can't ever forget that people have lost their lives. And this issue, which I was happy to share when I actually had a meeting with Senators Murkowski and Cortez Masto on Savannah's Act, to make sure that people understand that this issue has been happening since the Europeans got to this continent in the late 1400s. It's not an issue that's just, popped up over the last several generations, that Native women have been stolen and raped and murdered and abused for 500 years. And us passing the Violence Against Women Act and passing other legislation that we know will help, start to untangle this really complicated issue. It's just the tip of the iceberg. There is hundreds of other things left to do, and so I think part of my job is making sure that we get the public's attention and that we get the public support, and that it becomes an issue that people care about, that Americans care about. And by you writing about it, Mary Kathryn, by the actors here today wanting to be a part of it and throwing their passion behind these issues, I mean, these are real people and real stories. And so I just think that the work that you do will help the work that I do. And I'm proud to be your partner in this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for all your work on behalf of Native women. And I know you mentioned Savannah's Act and the Non-Invisible Act, which attacks the crisis of missing, murdered Indigenous women. Mary Kathryn, I wanted to ask you, what prompted you to write this play, and how do you think the impact of the play has been? I know you updated it for today, and what do you think there's left to do?
Well, first, I just want to thank the Congresswoman for taking the time to be with us and to be here. And I also want to note that, this play would not be possible without all the incredible women who share their stories. And Diane Milich, Billie Jo Rich, and Lisa Bruner, who joined us today and shared their stories. That is the engine of this play. And it's crazy, but when I started writing this play, I actually wrote it in 2013, started writing it when we didn't think we could get through the House. And I had several tribal leaders who came to me and said, what can we do? There's all these misperceptions about what tribal sovereignty is, about the rates of violence against Native women. And some folks had seen plays of mine. They said, could you write this play about what's happening? And we started to do the interviews. Billie Jo Rich, Lisa Bruner flew to DC, and we sat and we started, and all these people were offering up their stories to help get VAWA passed. And all of a sudden in February of 2013, as we were writing the play, it passed. And so then it became the question of, well, what do we do with the play now? And of course, we know Alaskan tribes were left out in 2013, and that's been a huge crisis, right? And a huge, huge issue for our brothers and sisters up in Alaska. So then we started working towards VAWA 2018. What can we do? I rewrote the play to focus a little bit more on hey, what about Alaska, right? We can't leave them out. We can't leave them behind. And then we get the first 2 Native women ever elected to Congress. And I just think, it's such an important moment. It's such a critical moment. Congresswoman, I don't know if there are words to describe the experience of when I was invited to testify before your committee on MMIW in March of 2019. And I sat there with, some amazing advocates like Sarah Deer and, Tammy Giroux and Ruth Ann Buffalo. And here we were, Native women speaking to a committee of the US Congress, and there was a Native woman sitting up there in one of those seats. That is a game changer for us. And I think this is just the beginning of what we're going to see in terms of restoration of safety for our women and sovereignty for our nations. And, what happened with Savannah's Act and Non-Invisible Act, that was not easy work, right? That's no small victory. Those were years in the making. Those are incredibly important bills that will, sort of force the hand of the feds in many ways to have to sit down at the table and work on these issues, to create guidelines and protocols on MMIW, not just to ignore the issue completely. So it's really a critical time. But unfortunately, the craziness is that we couldn't get VAWA 2018 done. And, you know, the bill that Congresswoman Holland and Congressman Tom Cole worked on, HR 1585, as referenced in the play, is a great bill. It's a bipartisan bill. It's very well written. The staff that worked on it, I mean, put a lot of time into it to not just get the policy in there, but to really, I mean, you know, you can imagine some of these can be complicated. You know, how do you address the Indian country issue in Alaska? And I know Senator Murkowski did a lot of important work on that too. So we have a lot of work left to do. And it's just an honor to be here and to be able to share this play. I want to say real quickly, ironically, today the Supreme Court granted cert in a case called United States v. Cooley. And my client, the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, joined the Crow Nation and other tribes in the Ninth Circuit and the United States asking the Supreme Court to grant cert. It actually relates directly to the issues we're talking about, because the Ninth Circuit actually in this decision, Cooley, said, actually, we're going to treat tribal law enforcement differently than state or federal law enforcement. State and federal law enforcement, they get to do a Terry stop or stop someone based on reasonable suspicion. But that's actually not enough for a tribal law officer on a reservation to detain a non-Indian going through the reservation if they have reasonable suspicion. That doesn't work. Instead, it needs to be obvious or apparent that that there's a crime being committed. What is that standard? Right? And so we're very thankful the Supreme Court's granted cert. I hope they make the right decision, but it just shows how important these issues today are of sovereignty, and why are our courts, why are our law enforcement, why are our tribal leaders or our Native women being treated differently or less than the state or the feds, right? And I think that's something we really have to grapple with going forward.
Thanks, Mary Kathryn. Yeah, I think the one thing that stuck out to me, I mean, there's so many, but one thing that stuck out to me in the play is that we're still here, and the part about expanding jurisdiction because we have to protect American citizens, because Native women are American citizens too. So Congresswoman, I wanted to ask you, we're going to be convening a new Congress in January with a new president. What do you see on the horizon? Do we have any hope that the version of VAWA that passed the House in 2019 could pass? And any other bills that you think you're going to introduce in the next Congress?
Yeah, so I mean, I still have my fingers crossed for Georgia, quite frankly, 2 Senate seats in Georgia. I mean, I think it's completely possible. And so we're working my campaign, I probably shouldn't say this on here, but you know, we're working to ensure that we get Native folks out to vote in Georgia. And so I mean, look, we'll still work very hard to get VAWA passed. I mean, look, it's so shameful that that this is even an issue, right? It's just I don't understand it. So I was hoping that you know, we'd have a more decisive situation on the Senate, but we'll continue to work hard. You know, we introduced a boarding school bill. It's a healing commission for boarding schools, and I know you referenced that here in the play. I mean,
and Congresswoman, can you tell a little bit about the boarding schools for our audience who might not be aware, because it's children are not taught that in schools, and I think a lot of people really don't know about what happened with Native children in boarding schools.
Right. Well, I mean, I just use my grandmother, for example. She was taken away from her family when she was 8 years old and sent to a Catholic boarding school 150 miles away from her home, when the only mode of transportation for her parents was a horse and a wagon. And so in the 5 years that she was away from home in this Catholic boarding school, her dad was only able to visit her twice in 5 years because he had to travel all the way to Santa Fe with a horse and a wagon. And you know, it was a government sanctioned policy to essentially try to kill the Indian and save the man, right? Take the Native out of their communities and make sure that they were incorporated into mainstream America. The assimilation policy of boarding schools was detrimental to so many families and tribes, and so we were visited, and Deborah Parker is a very large advocate for the trauma that boarding schools have caused, and she was sitting here in my office and talking about that. And so we thought, why don't we really pass legislation that will create this commission? Because they were having experiences where they would try to get information about their family members, and they were stopped. Like, people weren't forthcoming about information that should rightfully be shared. And so we want to make sure that families can have some healing over all of this historic trauma that has happened because of the boarding school US government policy. And I mean, boarding schools are still terrible in so many respects. And in fact, we have had hearings on those, currently as well. So we have a long way to go. And I think that, I consistently say that Native American history is American history. And yes, it's terrible that, we as Americans, we have to go out of our way to study Native American history if we have an inkling to learn more, because it isn't essentially taught to any large degree in our public schools. And so I just hope that, we can change that too.
Well, I'm going to ask this to both of you. I'll start with Mary Kathryn. I'll let the Congresswoman have the last word, but I know a lot of people have been sending in comments during the program to say, what can they do? How can people help? And what can we do to carry this powerful work forward that the stories were told today?
It's a great question. What can you do? Reach out to your congressional delegation, both in the Senate and the House. Let them know that restoring tribal criminal jurisdiction is a critical issue, right? And they need to hear from you. They need to know that this is a critical issue. And we need our non-Indian allies in that too, right? We need everyone to say this is super, super, super important. And I think also, there are amazing groups, grassroots groups doing, this work on the grounds, like the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, Sovereign Bodies Institute, Urban Indian Health Institute. They have a lot of work that they're doing, and you can sort of go to their websites and learn more about that. But I think it's really important that everyone reach out, regardless of whether your congressional delegation is Republican or Democrat, right? We've got a lot of Republicans who voted for VAWA, especially in the House. We got to change that in the Senate. And I think we have some supporters there, but they need to hear from you. And it's just so critical that they hear your voice.
Congresswoman?
And I would absolutely say that, we need to keep making sure that Native Americans have a voice in our politics. And I really want Native Americans to have a voice in this upcoming election in Georgia. It's all hands on deck right now. We absolutely, it matters who are in leadership positions. And I think we have seen that starkly over the last 4 years. It matters who sits, at the seat of power and decision making. So if there was ever a time, I've been an organizer for a long time. I've worked in Indian country. I just felt I started out as a phone volunteer because I wanted more Indians to vote. And it's an urgency right now. It's all hands on deck. We all need to participate. because our voices need to be heard. And, you know, there were more Native Americans running for public office in 2020, not just Congress, in state legislatures and county commissions and other offices across the country. And I just want to make sure that continues to happen. And of course, do everything we can to make sure this wonderful play makes it to the stage when the pandemic is over, right? That we support the work of the artists and like Mary Kathryn Nagle, who clearly can create with both sides of her brain, the creative side and the legal side, that she is a force to be reckoned with. And so I think we need to support artists like her and artists across the country who every day are speaking out and making sure that we are seeing, you know, their language in the way that they present it. And so, you know, this fight it's just never going to be done. We all have to be active members of our society. And you know, when I thinking about this play, the one scene where, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the characters' names, but they told the woman, just leave your reservation, just live somewhere else, and you can call the police then or whatever. This is our land. This is, you know, we have homelands that our ancestors lived on, and we have a connection to that land. It's not an easy thing for us to say, you know, things can just be different. We have a right to our ancestral homelands. We have a right to live in the places where our grandparents planted and hunted and loved and raised their families and fought, you know, drought and famine so that we could have a future. And it's not up to us. Just, you know, in the scene where Tom Cole says, what does he say? I'm their guy working with you. I'm not your guy working with them, right? It's on our terms. We're the first, you know, people to live on these lands, and we have to keep fighting for the things that our ancestors fought for. And so I just think that all of us need to be active members in this society and to move all of our issues forward. And there's many.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you, Mary Kathryn. And you are so right, Congresswoman, because you can bet that all of the horrible policies and laws that have passed didn't have Natives at the table when they were passed. So, so thrilled that you were with us today. And I know you've made history in the past, and I'm going to be hoping you make history again, thinking about you. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us today for this presentation. We thank all the advocates and panelists for the amazing, powerful performance. You are all doing such critical work that's very necessary. And I do want to thank the people who underwrite it so we could have a free performance today. Lauren Kiva, Jeff Stromer, Jerry Gardner, National Native American Bar Association, the Native American Rights Fund, and Robert Sanook. So thank you so much. And I also want to let people know we did have another program on the 18th, which was called Introduction to Status Realities, Legal Framework and Future of Indigenous Peoples in the United States and Canada. We had a fabulous panel with Kevin Gover, who's the head of the Smithsonian Museum of the American Indians. So you can view that recording. Please visit the link that's in the chat. There will be a recording of this program, which is in the chat as well. And the section of Civil Rights and Social Justice provides free webinars and resources And we hope this helps in your work. And please consider becoming active in the ABA. And thank you so much for this powerful performance, celebration of Indigenous women, their resilience, their perseverance. It was so important. And thank you everyone for all your important work. And as the Congresswoman Mary Kathryn said, there's more work to do, and we hope we have your help.